Ladies and gentlemen, members of the jury, thank you for being here for this roundtable live stream on Highways of a Legend. And my name's Aaron Kay, and I am blessed and privileged to be with this fine panel of gentlemen here to bring this event to the Bon Scott Forum. This has been an exciting thing to put together, and behind the scenes, you wouldn't have known it, but due to Mother Nature and her wicked ways, sometimes we didn't know if we were going to be able to pull this thing off on my end. So I want to just quickly go around the table here and make some introductions. And let me put up a ticker there where I can tell you about the panel. And I'm going to start with the man who helps make all of this possible. That's Mr. Jesse Fink, and of course, author of The Youngs, author of Bond, The Last Highway, and his newest release, Pure Narco. So, Jesse, how are you today, mate?
Excellent, mate. Great to be here. Thanks for putting it together.
Well, I am happy to do so, and thank you for trusting me with that. So I'm going to start up here in the left, and we'll go around. Um, my brother from Florida, Mr. Phil Olivieri from SoloDallas, makes some of the finest gear on the planet, and probably has every model of SG known to man. And that's only a couple of the cool things about him. So, Phil, how are you tonight, man?
I'm doing so great. Thanks very much for making this happen. Hello, everyone.
All right. And I want to come over to Mr. BJ Lisko. And BJ, thank you for being here, man. BJ is an author as well, working on an upcoming biography of Mr. Brian Johnson. And can't tell you how excited I am to have you here, BJ, because there's so many points that I know you're going to be able to offer up some, I'll say parallels, parallels and things. So how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me be a part of this panel, man. It's great.
No, thank you for being here. And down here at my bottom left, Mr. Michael Fazzolare. Did I pronounce that?
You did.
Awesome.
Who let my mom in here?
Hey, man, with us guys from Kentucky, we like to know that we pronounce the names correctly and everything. So
you did. You did excellent. Fazzolare.
Mr. Fazzolare. So thank you guys so much for being here. And again, my name's Aaron Kay, and I'm going to try to steer this ship as we go along. But I think the ultimate outcome we're all looking for here is that we are 41 years past the death, far too soon, I might add, of Mr. Bon Scott, who left us so much, such an incredible body of work. Legendary performances that we're all blessed by technology to be able to go back and see and witness. And he was such a force of nature on stage. And but I think on top of all of that, just was just an enigma in so many ways as a front man. So with that, what do you gentlemen say that we go ahead and light this candle?
Light it.
Good.
All right. So first up, I wanted to go around the table, and here we are, as I mentioned, 41 years after the passing of Bon Scott, and I'd just like to hear a bit from each of you what it is about Bon that is most special, but also most memorable to you, because he means so many different things to so many different people. And I thought it would be great for the folks in the forum who are watching that they could hear from each of us what he means to us individually. And if it's okay, I'd like to start with Mr. Jesse Fink.
Well, I mean, my personal story really sort of began out of, a pretty low point in my life where, I was, it was the middle of the night and I was, thinking of committing suicide, and I happened to put on some AC/DC, and it was Power Age, and it just sort of lifted me up at that moment, and in my opinion, kind of saved my life that night. And that sort of ended up with me writing a book about the Young Brothers back in 2013. And that book was a success, and my publisher was interested in a follow-up, and I suggested Bon Scott. and it was a no-brainer, really. What I didn't anticipate was that it was going to take so long to write. It was a really difficult book. And Bon, to me, had always been this incredibly charismatic, enigmatic, brilliant kind of frontman that I never thought actually got the critical dues that he was owed. And when you look at the output of AC/DC between 1975 and 1980, it's just on another level to anything that they did over the next 30, 40 years. And much of that, I think, had to do with Bon and his incredible gift for songwriting. He was also an amazing singer. He was a fantastic performer. And I think that probably 80% of AC/DC's songs that people know and love were written by Bon Scott. So I think he's a character that is known by a lot of people, but I don't think the real Bon is really known by a lot of people. And I think that the caricature of Bon as this sort of rock and roll animal, this person who was drinking 24 hours a day, getting up and shagging 5 women, and getting up and doing it again, is not a true reflection of who he actually was. So when I wrote the book, I ended up finding out that he was actually a very different person altogether.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Jesse. So if we could, let's go to my top left and go to BJ Lisko.
Oh man, Bon Scott, a pirate and a poet. The guy is just, Jesse alluded to this, and the run of material that he had. I mean, if you go from, there's really not a bad song in the Bon Scott era. And then when you look at like Let There Be Rock, to Powerage, to Highway to Hell, I mean, that's like the trifecta. I mean, those are, any one of those albums is a career-defining album for any other band. And the Bon Scott era of AC/DC had 3 of them back to back to back, and then they follow it with Back in Black, which is like it just an unprecedented level of quality and just kick-ass rock and roll. I mean, it's Power is the greatest record of all time. That's just case closed. There's no other argument. But I mean, that whole run was just ridiculous. And Bon Scott, his charisma as a frontman, and his the reality kind of in his lyrics too. I mean, that it was just on another level. It really was the perfect package.
Very well put. Michael Fazzolare, could you follow that up?
Well, I think what you asked was what was the thing that sort of defined Bon to us.
Yeah, what is it about Bon that's special to and most memorable to you?
I'm sure we'll get into all the fun times that I had with Bon and all the things that we did in that 2-month period. But I have to say what got me was his voice. That voice that you've never heard before and you've never heard since. There's guys who try to imitate him and some come pretty good, pretty close, but it was that voice and this reckless abandon of guitars and drums and just balls to the wall. And I fell in love with it immediately. I had to go get the records, and that was the whole thing. And it was his talent and everything else about him being, the guy's a sweetheart. And I'll explain all that stuff, why he was such a good guy. But in terms of the average fan that didn't get to know Bon, man, it's his lyrics, it's his voice, it's everything, the song crafting, and that was the intrinsic part of Bon Scott that was most appealing to me, and that was his just raw talent.
Awesome, good stuff. Thank you, Michael.
I was jealous. I hated him. I'm just kidding.
And coming down to Mr. Phil Olivieri.
Yes, your original question, Aaron, earlier when the forum unfortunately couldn't hear it, was what really impressed you of Bon. And I was very touched by what Jesse said the first time, which was the second time. So essentially, Jesse went on saying that AC/DC saved his life at some point one night. And well, that is very true for me, because I would say that AC/DC saved my entire youth, and particularly was Bon at the time, because I wasn't old enough for Brian just yet. I mean, I was there earlier. So I heard AC/DC with Bon, and now coming in, of course. Thank you. And so, no, Luna, I'm sorry, excuse me. And so, so that was that for me to hear AC/DC with Bon the first time, and for several years, saving my life and my entire youth. Number one, but for Bon specifically, I'll go exactly with everyone else what they said, but specifically with what Michael underlined. It was the voice. So that was the first thing that really got me. That lead voice, which the tonality, the timbre, such high register, and I don't even know how to define that, but the register of me being a musician, to me, it's essential. This, and I haven't heard, as Mike said, since but there's a lot of people that sing the covers and all that, and I love it, and that includes me, because I do a lot of AC/DC covers. But Bon was quite unique, and still is unique, for that incredible register and those lyrics. Wow.
His voice was like a musical instrument, almost like a unique, bizarre musical instrument in and of itself. It just was its own thing, didn't try to do the American Idol or The Voice,
the
roller coasters. It just was his voice, period. I don't know. Would Bon have advanced on The Voice or American Idol nowadays? I don't know, but I'd rather sing like Bon than. It was pretty good right there, man. On The Voice.
Well, the thing that I wanted to say for just quickly for myself, and I believe it was BJ that I discussed this with a bit the other night. I was exactly 1 month old when Bon Scott passed away. So for me, as I began to get into music and to go back and learn about his legacy and about all of his body of work with AC/DC, but I think for me to couple what Michael said about his voice, what Phil said about his voice as well, is that unique full chest, but high register approach to his work, but also just the fact I always had such great admiration for those frontmen who could walk up onto a stage and have a crowd right here and just control and just do whatever they wanted to with them. And to Jesse's point, I feel like Bon Scott fit that mold so well because he was such an incredible frontman. I mean, when I say force of nature, enigma, those kind of, I don't throw those terms around lightly, but I definitely think they all apply to Bon Scott. So
yeah, I think one of the remarkable things about Bon is that even when he's actually not singing, he's absolutely incredible what he's doing off on the side of the stage when Angus is playing his guitar. So you want to watch Bon because he's just an amazing mover.
Yeah.
And that's something that people don't even talk about much. It's just that how he uses that stage, and you're just totally sort of locked into this, completely transfixed by Bon, just watching him. And so, and then you add the fact that he's an incredible singer, and that his lyrics are as funny and clever as any great writer. And then you couple that with the fact that he's an incredibly charismatic person who was leading this incredible life, off stage. What a fascinating guy! There's never been anyone like him. And all these sort of 80s rock stars, these phonies from LA, they talk about Bon and try and kind of imitate Bon, but they will never ever come close to him.
Well, it's like they say, if you're going to try and steal, you might as well try and steal from the best, right, Jesse?
That's right.
Well, listen, so as we get into this, looks like everyone's hearing great now. So thank you guys for sticking it out with us in that. And we're getting a lot of good feedback there in the forum. So I really hope everybody's enjoying this. And thank you again to the panel for being part of this. And I wanted to, moving forward, after we've all discussed a bit what Bond has meant to us individually, I wanted to also start here in terms of just a couple items from the book, and of course I'm speaking about Jesse's masterpiece in terms of detail and research and just you know speaking of the dynamic in the band between Bon and Malcolm. It's mentioned several times, and I was left to sort of presume that this was due to the fact that Malcolm didn't really care for Bond's drinking. Um, in writing the book, did you ever, Jesse, get the feeling that there was more to that tension based dynamic than just substance?
Sorry, then how do you mean substance?
I was saying that with Bon and Malcolm, it was alluded to that Malcolm had taken issue with Bond's behavior in terms of specifically drinking. Now, I don't recall in listening to
Well,
the book and reading the book that it ever got into substance, quote unquote. That was probably poor word choice on my part. But did you ever get the vibe that it was more than just um, uh, alcohol or substance between the two of them?
well, I mean, there was a show in Rhode Island where apparently, he was so pissed that they couldn't even continue the show. So, you got to put it in the perspective of, this was a very ambitious, hardworking band who had aspirations to be the biggest rock band in the world. Now, if their lead singer, is having problems drinking and can't finish a show, the leader of the band obviously has an issue with the singer. But Michael probably is the best person to ask here because he hung out with Bon and Malcolm in Miami during the recording of Highway to Hell. So he could tell you, what he observed.
You read my mind. I was going to Michael next. So,
Well,
Michael, tell us about your experiences with Bond and any experience you had with that dynamic.
well, the fact of the matter is that Bond definitely enjoyed double Jack and Cokes, and more than one. And this was a nightly thing at the club. In the book, I kind of tell how we met, and it was at a club we were playing, the Tight Squeeze in Hollywood, Florida, right on the beach, right there. Jesse saw it. Well, he saw where the building was, and we ran into him in the bathroom. And the next night they were there, and then they kept coming. And then he brought Malcolm, and it was a party. Listen, Malcolm and Cliff, Phil, we were all knocking them back. So, but Bond would he would keep it going. There was one morning we were at the Newport, me and a friend of mine named Frank, and it was 5 a.m, and we were ready to go. And Bond pulls out a bottle of Blue Nun wine. I don't know if they still make that. And he was like, "Come on, let's open it up." No insult to Bond with that impersonation, by the way. But anyway, and we had to put the kibosh on it. We just said, Bond, we felt bad for him because he seemed like he was very sad that we were leaving. And he was already pretty pissed out of his mind at that point. He was flying. So yeah, the alcohol thing was the predominant thing that I saw that he was abusing, and other things were recreational, so to speak. But that was, yeah,
Yeah, I mean that was
sad, in a way.
that was a really interesting thing, was going down to Miami and kind of that whole sort of period in Bond's life in Florida, kind of opening up to me through Michael and other people that I was introduced to down there. And what was obvious was that Bond not only quite apart from drinking was also getting into quaaludes and cocaine and drugs like that. So I guess the talk obviously is about, you know, how Bond died and whether he died of a heroin overdose or not. But the factor of the matter is, you know, according to people who were there in Miami, you know, Bond was partaking in recreational drugs. He wasn't just a drinker.
Oh yeah, no. There was a lot of cocaine usage there. You know, we were smoking, not cigarettes, well, cigarettes too, but yeah, it was a lot of hard partying going on there, and it was all the time, all the time. You know, from the minute the night started till the wee hours of the morning, man, it was just pretty excessive. So no heroin, and I didn't see any quaaludes, but I wasn't with Bond every second, so I don't know. But there was enough going down that it was a dangerous thing, at least in my eyes. And the result, as we all know, Bond passing.
Phil, thank you for that, Michael. Phil, I want to come to you in just a moment. BJ, I wanted to ask you something real quick. So we all know about the instance in Jesse's book where Bond comes off stage, and I'm having trouble at the moment remembering exactly what year, if that was towards the making of Highway to Hell, if it was in that vicinity or not. But he comes off stage, says, "I effed up. They're going to hurt me." He's in a panic, apparently over making a mistake. And the thing that I wanted to ask, number one, was, do you, and I'll come back to Jesse in a moment, but do you take that as being literal, metaphorical, you know, figurative, or do you think he was just having trouble grasping the gravity of the situation due to his drinking and substance use, first and foremost? And then I have a follow-up that I wanted to ask you, sort of drawing a parallel between Bond and some other members of AC/DC and their treatment within the band.
I think that in that moment, I mean, I'm sure he said that, and he thought, you know, I don't think anybody was actually going to hurt him or anything like that. But again, I mean, if he screwed something up on stage, you know, what led up to that? I mean, how hard was he partying for how many days? And like, and you know this, I mean, anybody that's drank a whole bunch or been on like any kind of, you know, true bender, you know, eventually you wake up and like, you know, suddenly you're all kind of like, you know, you're all emotional. The serotonin's all whacked out in your brain. You're all over the place. So, I mean, it might have been one of those kind of deals where he just, you know, he might have been genuinely kind of panicked in that moment. But again, that could have been the result of you know, just of a lot that sort of maybe preceded. I'm only speculating there, but I didn't take that as, I don't doubt that he said it or anything like that. But I didn't take it that the you know, that harm was actually going to come to him from the Youngs or anything like that. I don't believe it was anything like that.
No, that incident was in Texas.
Yeah.
And you know, and as I say in, you know, both the books that I've written on AC/DC, it's like, you know, there's this Rashomon effect. I mean, you can have different witnesses to a particular event and everyone interprets it differently. So, you know, we can't take everything literally, you know, and all I try to do by presenting the information in my books is for readers to make up their own mind about who he was.
Yeah, no, and I think that's all, and certainly, and I didn't take it for myself either to mean that he was literally concerned that someone was going to do physical harm to him. But you did, I think, in that instance in the book, if I remember correctly, there was the question about had paranoia started to set in, because of course he had the heroin overdose. I believe that was in 1975. That had left that sort of lingering tension, which I'm sure didn't help the dynamic between himself and Malcolm either. I'm sure that was a contributing factor as well.
But I mean, the title, you know, The Last Highway, was really about the journey that he took in America between 77 and 79. So all along, you know, I'm looking at the death of Bon Scott and I'm thinking, okay, he's found in a car on a street in London. How did he get there? Now, no one had ever really kind of looked at the preceding 3 years and what he was doing on the road in the United States. So there was a road to his oblivion, which he took.
Right.
So that's what the title is about, The Last Highway. It was the road that he took to his death. So when I was writing the book, I literally, started out with a map of America. I started, putting pins into cities where AC/DC had played, and going and finding the DJs who promoted AC/DC in those cities, and trying to get as much information as I can about what he was doing in each of these places. And that was actually how I found Michael. Was that I started out writing this book thinking, yeah, I'll write a biography of Bon Scott. It'll be fantastic. But boy, it was really difficult. And when you're trying to kind of write something and information is very hard to come by. People don't want to talk. The band didn't want to talk. All that kind of thing. It's incredibly difficult. So I ended up finding a DJ called Neil Mursky, who was working in Orlando in 1979, who had a voice recording of Bon that he'd never played, and he gave it to me. He said, "Oh, you should talk to Michael Fazzolare." Bon and Michael were good friends in Miami, and it was through Michael that I met the woman known as Holly X, who was his girlfriend in Miami. So Michael and I both know Holly, and then she gave me a great insight into what was going on with Bon down there. And I think it's pretty clear that the Bon was sort of running off the rails by the end of 1979. So what happened in 1980 wasn't like this isolated freak accident. It was
A
coming
snowball effect.
before that. Huh?
Yeah, I think
Like a
that's
snowball effect.
Yeah.
It took off and it got worse, and it
I think
culminated in his death. 41 years, man. Wow.
Yeah, well, we've got 5 guys and 90 minutes to work with here. So, I just was trying to connect some dots and draw some parallels, if that's okay. And I did want to let you know we got a comment here in the forum. This is the best podcast I've ever watched. So, gentlemen, I think we're off to a good start here. So, but if you would, you just bear with me. I just want to draw a couple parallels, and like I said, we'll go right straight to those major points here a bit toward the end. But I wanted to ask specifically in that follow up to BJ, because I think BJ, you're going to have, bear with me one moment here. There was an interview with, so BJ, this one was for you. There was an interview, and it's not been too long now, with Chris Slade. And this, of course, was post Rocker Bus Tour. And I promised Jesse we would get right back to, but this is just, again, drawing a parallel between the two. So Chris had been asked, did Malcolm ever comment to you about your playing, about your presence, about your tempo, or anything like that? And he said, just one time, he said, you're pushing a bit, mate. That was the only comment that he ever really made to him. And so the thing that I wanted to ask you, BJ, being that you're doing this, doing pretty extensive work in regards to Brian Johnson and his tenure in AC/DC as well right now, just trying to draw a parallel between how Malcolm or other guys in the band may have interacted with Bon. Did you hear any instances of criticism levied at Brian, similar to, well, I'm assuming that Bon may have gotten from Malcolm or other members of the band, whether it was based on alcohol or substance?
No, I mean, nothing based on alcohol or substance or anything like that. No, and I don't really think that I don't think they really. I think if look, Brian's probably the best company man in the history of company men. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, he's been the guy. I mean, he kind of just is. He's the singer, and he does pretty much kind of what they ask. And he always shows up for his job. I mean, he gives it. He gives it his best each and every time out. Now, but no, I don't think that they've ever really criticized him for the way he sang. The only criticism that I ever heard levied toward Brian from Malcolm was you know, at some point in the 80s, he told him, like, hey man, just quit talking between songs. Like, shut up, just let the music do the talking. You're talking too much. And then Brian's like, all right. And then, you know, you heard Brian talk a lot less after that, you know, because I mean, you go back and listen to any kind of live bootlegs or live stuff from the 80s. Brian did kind of ramble on at certain points in between stuff where it was like, you didn't need to do any of that, you know, just introduce a song, you know, you ready? And then they're off. So that's, you know, but no, not really. I don't know. I don't know how much criticism they gave to Bond for anything performance-wise or anything like that. I mean, they might have been concerned about you know, how much he might have been partying, whatever. But you know, I mean, I think if you show up and do the job, as far as the youngs are concerned, I mean, that's, you know, they're I don't think you're getting on their shit list if you're showing up on time.
Yeah, exactly.
I saw.
And I just want I come right to you, Michael. I just wanted to say real quick, and of course in the book, it's referenced that Angus, one of the primary differences between Angus and everybody else was that Angus was sort of more willing to be, as compared to guys that would go out and party. He was a little more willing to be reclusive, sort of after shows and whatnot, because he saw the money-making potential of AC/DC as a rock and roll entity, and he didn't want to blow that opportunity. So what I was alluding to there, and yeah, maybe could choose a different word there other than criticism in regards to Bond. It had to do more with his behavior. I guess maybe behavior would be a better way to put it, off stage, and what was being carried on stage. But just wanted to again just try to draw those parallels. Phil, you have so much knowledge and history of what was being done with gear from album to album, from cycle to cycle. Okay, because in Jesse's book he references the Schaefer Vega diversity system, which you're now making the replicas of, the Schaefer replica. Once that was brought into play, first of all, could you speak to exactly when that was? Because I know it was in the realm of Jesse's timeline, and we want to, of course, stick to that. So, if you could just maybe speak to when that came into play, and then also what difference maybe that brought to the live shows. For example, the iconic picture of Angus on top of Bond's shoulders. That's always something I think about when I'm thinking of Bond as a front man. If you would want to speak to that, so.
Yes, of course. So the Schaefer Vega, so this wireless system, which was one of the very first ones that was introduced in the market internationally for guitar player, bass players, and singers, it was introduced roughly around 1975. That's when Ken Schaefer, in person, the inventor, tells me that he started to place the very first prototypes amongst bands. The first one being Electric Light Orchestra and the Rolling Stones. The AC/DC got their two units to begin with, and then they purchased a bit more, probably two more. And we have to remember that they were extremely expensive, right, especially for back in the day. So at the time, they were about $4,100, $4,200, something like that. But if you index those American dollars to today, it's about $20,000. So back in the day, not many people really could afford that type of device. So Kenny Schaefer showed up in New York at the Palladium in what seems to be, I think, August 1977. I'm confused right now. I'm getting old. It could be August or October. I'm confused between those two dates. Maybe Jesse will remember that.
That was their first New York show. Yeah.
Excellent. So Kenny Schaefer showed up at the Palladium directly, which is when he established Ken Schaefer friendship with Angus Young. So Ken and Angus actually became sort of friends whenever Angus or AC/DC would return to New York. The two would meet, as Jesse knows, because Jesse also spoke with Kenny himself when he went to New York. And Angus actually happened to sleep in Kenny's apartment, which is now pretty a famous apartment. And he still lives there, Kenny Schaefer, still lives in that apartment. Kenny Schaefer, we salute you once again, because you will see this tomorrow on another day whenever you can. And and Angus went there in that small flat that I also visited in a number of occasions. And I was wondering, looking at the walls and stuff, because so much history, passed through that. And Jesse's nodding because Jesse knows. So many musicians and artists in general, not only musicians, but artists and thinkers of all times through the decades passed through that particular apartment in New York. And so AC/DC acquired 2 of the units. It wasn't Angus Young actually testing the unit on that very same night, because as Angus says himself, he was giving an interview. So it was Malcolm and Cliff that tested the Schaefer Vega, and they said, "Oh, it sounds awesome, mate." So they liked it, and they said also, "You can further saturate your amplifier, Angus." So he liked it very much. And the phrase that stuck to me from Angus talking about the Schaefer was that he could go wherever he wanted to go. So that was important. Not that he wasn't trying to go already.
Sure,
Angus
yeah.
had been trying to go everywhere, and the cable would take him there as well. So you mentioned, rightfully so, Aaron, you mentioned that Angus would jump on Bond's shoulders and Bond would take him. But that would happen also with the cable. You can see the people feeding that cable.
Yeah.
So when Angus actually got the wireless, he just was a little bit more free, just with this little package. This is actually the transmitter from the Schaefer Vega from those years. Angus had a few just like this one, and I put just 4 kicks. I put Angus written there because this is exactly from 77, like one of those first units. So Angus would put that little transmitter and just would jump on Bond's shoulders, and they would just go through to the people. I don't even know to this day how they got that. I mean, it wasn't the only couple doing that in those days. But if you look at the people, they were walking through. I mean, some people trying to touch Angus' guitar. Angus was still playing. Actually, sorry, let me rephrase that. Angus was still playing greatly. Damn it! How? What a talent! How old was he? How old were they? Angus and Bond. But let me say this in Italian, Mike. Mamma mia. You will agree.
Mannaggia la miseria.
Mannaggia la miseria, says Michael. And he's right. So that means, wow, what amount of talent there. So I hope I was able to give my little contribution.
Absolutely, man. And I'm going to come to Michael straight away here. So, brother, tell us about, to start at the beginning, because I know it's within Jesse's timeline. I know that's important to him. So tell us about your beginnings with Bond, your introduction to Bond, meeting him, how you put, the way you put it to me, you became quite inseparable in the time you spent in Miami as they were recording Highway to Hell, which was, I think you told me originally.
They were rehearsing. They were rehearsing.
Yes. Yeah.
Just to back up just a little bit, when you guys were talking about, were there any threats that I don't know? If you saw Bond and you saw Angus and Malcolm, I don't know that they would. Bond could beat them up. I don't know how else to put it. So come on, put him up. Anyway, yeah, Bond probably would have won that one. The one thing that I heard, though, when they were rehearsing, they were doing Girls Got Rhythm, and Bond was singing, instead of what it turned into, what She's Got the Backseat Rhythm, he was singing some suggested things, and one of them was She's Got the Freestyle Rhythm. Well, Malcolm stopped the song and said, "You got to change that. You got to." And they came up with Backseat. I don't see the difference. Right? Aren't they both suggesting the same thing? I'm not having a game of Yahtzee back there, but anyway, that was the only thing. The only time I heard any criticism or correcting Bond's lyrics. You got to remember, Malcolm asked the band, he said, "Look, we're doing a slight change of direction, meaning we're going to go a little more on the commercial side than what we've been doing." And he asked the guys, are they okay with it? And they all agreed with it. So I guess maybe he wanted to tame down some of the lyrics. I don't know. So that was my one experience with Malcolm telling Bond sing something different.
And just to clarify, that was as you were at rehearsals, you were just watching rehearsals, right?
MSR,
Yeah.
Musician Studio Rentals, in that place. It turned into, Jesse, do you remember when we went by there? What did it, some auto salvage or auto something, or?
It was like a panel beater or something, from memory. I can't remember. Yeah, some sort of.
I know.
auto-
Yeah. It wasn't had nothing to do with music any longer. You know, it just.
So when I was in Miami with Michael, we went out in the car and we went out to the Newport Hotel where Bon stayed, and then we went to the location of the rehearsal studios where Michael hung out with AC/DC. Where else did we go?
Went to the house in Key Biscayne, Holly's house.
house.
That was, yeah.
And we went to the location of the Tight Squeeze Club. So it was like a really fascinating day just to sort of get a sense of what they were doing. So, up until I guess I wrote this book, that whole period in Miami was kind of a bit of a blank. But what was interesting was how much actually happened there.
Anyway, to answer Aaron's question, I was always at the Tight Squeeze. We had the night off. That was the premier rock and roll bar. If bands would come in there, Ted Nugent was in there, Aerosmith came in there, Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. It was the place to go. And a lot of guys were Criteria recording, or they were vacationing in Miami. So they would just frequent the club. Anyway, the one night I decided to stay home. The next morning I get a call from our bass player, Henry. And Henry goes, "You missed it. You blew it." I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Bon was there." I go, "The Bon Scott?" And he goes, "How many Bon Scotts do you know, idiot?" And I go, "Oh, no. So I said, "All right, well, I'm gonna go tonight." And I went, and not only was Bon there, but Malcolm was there, Phil was there, Cliff was there. Not Angus. I didn't see Angus until we went to the Newport one night and went in there, and this guy comes out of one of the rooms or something, and wearing tight corduroys and stylish boots. And our drummer Mike Barone was with us, and when we left, I go, "Who was that? Who was that young guy that came out?" He goes, "That was Angus, man." I go, "No way! I was used to seeing Angus with the backpack and the school thing, and it was just color me stupid." But they were in there and they were eating pizza, drinking milk, and were taking care of themselves on the road. And that's when it all started. They would come into the club every night, and we'd go on break, and we'd be, and that's terrible. And we were lucky to have Bon Scott one night come up and sing a few songs off of Power Age with us. And he sang "Give Me a Bullet," which, Jesse, that's the song, right?
That's right. Yeah.
That's the song. And "Up to My Neck." And Bon was kind of like cooked, he was sauced out, but he was singing, he was belting it out, and we were all running around like idiots, but it was really Bon Scott on stage. But it was just a blast. And he was just going, "These guys are crazy. These guys are crazy," during everything. And it was just like, I don't know. I'm in my 60s now. And to think that when I was in my, 22, 23, that this is like a dream come true, man. You're on stage, and here's God singing with you. God is singing with my band, and we're playing killer songs off an album that we were doing before we met AC/DC. That's how much we love the band. We're one of the few bands that were doing AC/DC covers. And I still got a bone over it.
Well, yeah, rightfully so. I think, judging by everyone's smiles, I think, and Phil's claps, I think you're entitled to that, right, everybody? If we could, just let me take 1 second, if it's okay with everybody. I got to share some of these comments that are coming in, man. These are great. As I mentioned, we've already gotten one said this is the greatest podcast I've ever watched. So that was great. Another one, excellent. As I've told Mr. Phil Olivieri before, love your passion, Phil, is what someone in the forum has commented there. And I wanted to, so to Michael's story about watching rehearsal and Malcolm making the suggestion about the lyrics. Freestyle rhythm is way less suggestive than backseat rhythm.
I thought the same thing, man. I've said it. It's like, I don't know. Maybe sometimes you have to, somebody wants to exercise control just because they have to. I have nothing to pick on. So let me just go ahead and switch that around. And I'm like, they're really synonyms. I mean,
yeah. Kathy McFarland says, thank you all for doing this. Kathy, it's our pleasure. And Paul Wozniak says, tight squeeze, big denim balls. So I thought Michael would appreciate that one.
It was only around for 9 months, that club. But what happened in 9 months in that club, clubs that were open for decades never saw what went on in that place. Just fun.
Well,
and there was a band called Tight Squeeze too in Miami, and they also had Bon, I think, play on stage with them. Is that right, Michael?
I don't remember. Very, very likely he could have if somebody said they did. You have to understand something. That was in Hallandale, which is just south of Hollywood, and the drinking laws were the bars could stay open until 6 a.m. So a lot of times, if we finished or I went home. Bon could have been there till 5, 6 o'clock and got up and sang with them late. So I would say it's likely. I would bet on it that he probably did. I know that the only song that Tight Squeeze, it might not be the only one I ever saw them play was Overdose. So they could have got Bon up there to do Overdose. Don't know. Likely.
Well, listen, I want to take, I did send out some requests for questions from those that might be watching or just Bond fans in general. So I do want to take this question because Michael may know, Jesse may know, Phil may have some knowledge on this, or even BJ. Question from Mr. Ronnie Elvis James, actually comes from an incredible band out of Nashville called Luther. Question is, what rituals did Bond have before going on stage? And I thought that I've never heard that question asked. I've never known of the information. So I want to open that up to the panel. Does anyone have any information on that? Because I thought it was a great question.
Don't know.
I
never saw it.
I'm not aware that he, had any sort of OCD rituals like Rafael Nadal or anything like that. No, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, Mark Evans said that that Bond would line up a certain number of drinks. But I mean, I didn't even mention that. I said I don't know because at this point,
but that's hearsay.
Pretty evident that was going on. So I don't know if that was actually something that he would do constantly. But Mark mentioned that.
I do know that he was a bit of a neat freak. Like his girlfriends have said that he was a very neat person and that he took good care of himself and was very meticulous with his appearance and always made sure that his clothes looked good, and that was
his hotel room was immaculate. It wasn't, are there any AC/DC trashes the motel room stories? I don't know if I'd believe it. It was like, did the maid come in here or what? This was like 4 a.m, 5 a.m. So
good to know.
He was. I never thought of it, but yeah. I think the bed was made. Still had the paper on the toilet bowl. The strip
a lot of
sanitized.
A lot of musicians that I spoke to said that he would go out and get completely plastered, but he would be the first person to wake up in the morning and be in the hotel lobby and look fantastic and just be immaculate. So that sort of really goes against, I guess, the impression we have from all these stories of the wild man, because he wasn't like that at all.
No, I felt bad. One morning I went there and I think it was when we were going to that party out at Holly X's in Key Biscayne. And we were picking Bon up and he came out of the shower and I said, like an idiot, I held up a joint and I said, well, Bon, you want me to fire this up? Nope, not today. Nope, not going to do it. Nope. I apologize for doing the voice. I can't help it. Anyway, I love the guy. He was funny. He was just a funny guy. And it wasn't that he said always funny things. He said things funny. And that was one of them. He's just going, nope. I swear, maybe a minute and a half passed, right? I'm doing a watch thing there. Maybe a minute and he goes, well, what are you waiting for? So we lit it up and smoked and went to the party and smoked some more. And, what am I going to do? You know, I'm 22-year-old kid and I'm with some guy. I'm going to party with Bon Scott, man. I don't know, you know.
What was that story though with the chili in a restaurant in Miami?
We went for a drive. There were basically 9 sets, so they would have 3 or 4 bands a night playing at the tight squeeze, and you'd play 2 sets. Mostly it was original music. A lot of it was original music, and we decided to go for a ride with Bon. Now, Bon is riding in the back seat in the middle. I was in the passenger seat. I forget who was driving, but Bon was in the back in the middle. Maybe Henry, our bass player, was driving, and we ended up at this place called Sambo's, which ended up kind of having to close down because people thought it was a racist name, Sambo, and it wasn't. It was a portmanteau of the owners' names, Sam and Bo. But anyway, so we end up in there, and Bon, you want to get something to eat? And he's like, no, I don't want anything. So while we're looking at the menu, he's looking at the pictures of the food on the wall, and he calls the waitress over, and he's giving her a hard time, going, yeah, I bet the food doesn't look like this in the pictures. And he's pointing to the other people's food, and he's like pointing out that it was, you know, nothing like that. And she just wrote it off as some drunk guy. Anyway, so I ordered a bowl of chili, and I like to eat. You can see I'm a big guy. Anyway, Bon goes, that looks pretty good. So he grabs a spoon and he takes a bite, you know, and then he starts taking more, and he starts taking more. So I'm like eating, we're having a contest. He goes, look at him go. And I said, Bon, here. And I gave him the bowl of chili. I don't know if the guy had eaten in 3 days, you know, and I didn't need it, so I could skip a meal. And it was just one of the funniest things. And he ate the whole thing. So I fed Bon. I could say I actually fed the Italian guy, fed Bon. I should have bought him an extra bowl. Probably would have went for it. But
Well, I want to get into a few points as we start to wind down here in just a few minutes. I want to get into a few points. They're going to cover all the last the last days of Bon Scott. I do want to talk about one incident that I found really interesting, and Jesse, I hope this is okay with you. Michael, I wanted to ask you, you know, that it's Bon is always described as such a genuinely nice guy, fun guy, someone, you know, that's a blast to be around. And just there was an incident with Robin Zander, so from Cheap Trick, you know, on tour. And of course, we know he's referenced Cheap Trick as being they're just pop. They're totally pop. And I don't know if that meant that there was, you know, he didn't respect them as much or didn't feel that they should be on the same bill, or what the situation was. But they sat down. Robin Zander sat down for breakfast with Bon, and Bon says, "Let me clear the table off for you." Shoves everything off the table and onto the floor. And any thoughts from you, Michael, first, and then I'll come to Jesse. Any thoughts from you what may have been behind that, being that of all of us, you knew Bon, and could any stab at attempting at trying to decipher that? Yeah.
AC/DC wasn't as big as Cheap Trick was at that point in space and time, because I saw them both. And this was before I knew Bon, playing at a place in Miami called the Gusman Theater, almost like an old opera house looking place with the stage and the balconies and like an opera house kind of thing built out the 1920s or 30s, I think, or at least it seemed that way. Well, Cheap Trick was the headliner, and AC/DC was the opening act, and
Yeah.
I mean, AC/DC blew them off the stage. And I love Cheap Trick. Don't get me wrong. I love a lot of Cheap Trick stuff. So a lot of people compared some of my songs to Cheap Trick songs. I wish they'd compare them with something. But anyway, they kind of blew them off the stage. Was Bon on some kind of a power thing, or was he buzzed, or to do something like that? But I don't know. I didn't hear anything about there being anything crazy between them. But
How about you, Jesse? Any take on that?
Well, I think he was an impulsive person for sure. I mean, was it you, Michael, who told me the story about him drinking an ashtray full of cigarettes?
he picked up one of those restaurant black ashtrays, and it was overflowing. I mean, it was over the top with cigarette butts and ashes, and he was so lit that he picked it up and he started to drink it, and cigarettes and ashes are rolling down his shirt. And one of us quickly grabbed it away from him and had him drink something. But it wasn't like he even, normally you would react right away. You know, I don't know. I don't know if he swallowed a few butts in the process or something, but yeah.
I mean, it was
That's when I knew, man.
as a joke.
What's that?
He was obviously doing it as a joke, you know, just to.
No. He did it because he was fried.
Yeah, because he was.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no. It was inadvertent. He thought he was picking up a drink. He was that. No.
Yeah, but
And that's when I knew something was really over the top. You know?
Getting back to your question, Aaron, you know, I did hear a story that, you know, in London he would be so completely pissed that he could, you know, urinate in the middle of someone's living room floor, you know. So there is a duality to Bond. You know, he could be, you know, I guess, a wild man and out of control in certain situations, but then there were others where he was, you know, completely normal and very sober. But I think towards the end, obviously, he was running off the rails a bit, and that's when I think, you know, he was introduced to that heroin crowd in London.
Most of the time, he was very laid back and subdued. That same night that we went driving around North Miami Beach, and we were in the car, and I go, "Hey, Bond, have you ever heard of the Sex Pistols?" So I popped in a Sex Pistols cassette, and I guess he was somewhat familiar with them because we have it blasting, and he's singing along at the top of his lungs. And I would say probably after 2 minutes into "God Save the Queen," he yells out, "Am I allowed to use expletives here? Or should I not?"
Jesse's call.
You'll go for it.
He goes, "Turn that fucking shit off!" Guess what I did? I turned that fucking shit off. So, and I love the Pistols, but it was just, so that was the only time that I ever saw him kind of really come out of his shell, so to speak. He was mellow and polite, and smiling and cheerful, and asking you how you're doing, and you know. I once asked Bond, I said, "Bond, am I bigger than Rosie?" And he goes, "Mate, you're a pickle in an elephant's ass compared to Rosie." I got the metaphor, and I thanked him for it. You know, she was a big girl, huh? I guess, I don't know. Well, hey,
well, let's
to give you the crazy side of Bond. You know, I don't know. It's like,
yeah,
we're all friggin' nuts, man, in some way, anyway. You know.
He said he burned his ass in a light bulb. Remember that?
Really?
That was the quote. She's so big he burned his ass in a light bulb.
I don't know.
It's one of his metaphors.
Oh, funny guy. He was a funny guy, and he was just, you know, just very clever. You know, just one thing he told me. He goes, "Never ask somebody for their opinion because you just might get it." That's what he told me. And
well, yeah, good point. I want to come down as we work our way to the end here. Of course, we coming up on the anniversary that we're here to celebrate, of course, and that's the death of Bon Scott. And, you know, Jesse, I do want to have you field this one, if you don't mind. In writing for The Last Highway, you made a request for a probate file for Bon Scott. And I believe in prepping for this, I believe I heard you say that it was $100, and you sent $100, you got the full probate file. And I just wondered if you could sort of pull us in, take us back to that moment, as you're, I'm sure, maybe the only person in the world in this time frame who has done something like that, and just sort of take us back to that moment as you open that file up and start to see this information. What's going through your mind, and what kind of emotions are you feeling as you go through that process?
Well, I actually found an old copy of the Sydney Morning Herald from the early 80s. Notice, you know, you have to make a legal notice of the probate, and it listed, you know, Bond's parents, anyone who knew, you know, Ronald Scott. Please get in touch with these lawyers. And so I thought there must be a record of it with the New South Wales government, and it was there. But it was I think it was they'd made a typo in the name or something, and obviously no one had ever actually applied for it. So the woman, who I was dealing with said, no, we've never had anyone kind of ask for this. And yeah, it arrived in the mail. I paid $100, and there you go. I've got a list of all the assets of Bon Scott and of AC/DC, which was incredible. Which said that he died essentially with $30,000 to his name, which even in 1979, for a guy who worked as hard as he did, is not a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah.
Now, when you think that AC/DC now is like $1 billion band, for Bon to die with $30,000 to his name, I just think is tragic.
I was going to ask, just because
if I had known that he had $30,000, I would have made him pay for that chili. By the way, that was just, sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to ask, because obviously, Jesse, there are so many details, and I'm coming down here. I want to include. I think I've got some things here at the end that are going to include everybody, and I just wanted to ask, because there are so many details and there's so much that happened the night of, so many witnesses that had seen certain things that had to do with Bon and heroin and various things at the club, and then also as we go on to when he was actually left in the car. And just let me ask it in a summarized fashion, okay? What do you think, in your estimation, is the biggest misconception about Bon's death?
Well, that it all had to do with alcohol.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the biggest misconception. And so, depending on where you go on Google to get your information about Bon Scott, either he died of from alcohol poisoning, or, and I'm heartened to see this, finally people are starting to kind of mention heroin as being complicit in his death. And the reality is, if you look at Bon's death as forensically as I did, for a year and a half, I couldn't come to any other conclusion that heroin was somehow involved in my feeling is that he was already dead in the car and he was left in the car. And Alistair Kinnear waited as long as possible before he took him to the hospital.
And just one last thing before we move on from that, it's been summarized as well with you in various interviews, and that Silver was his primary significant other in life. How would you summarize her feelings, because you spent so much time with her? You've alluded to having to gain her trust as you worked with her on the book. How would you summarize her feelings about Bon's death and her memories of Bon as you worked with her in capturing all of that in the book?
I think Silver had a lot of affection for Bon, but she knew the real Bon, and she knew that she couldn't live with him. So she had made it very clear to him by the end of his life that, romantically, there was no future for either of them together. And I think I get the feeling that, Silver didn't necessarily tell me everything that she knew about that night, but I got out of her as much as I could, or as much as she was comfortable telling me. And, that's all I can do. I mean, there are an ever dwindling number of people who were there that night. And, since the book was written, Pete Way has died, Paul Chapman has died, Silver Smith has died, Kula Kukuli has died, Alistair Kinnear is obviously dead. So, there aren't a lot of people who were there who could actually tell you what happened. So really it was and is a very difficult thing to put together. And you know, I come up with two scenarios for how he died, and I can't say definitively how he died, but I think either of those two scenarios is the most likely kind of explanation for what happened. But irrespective of what caused his death, I think I don't want to dwell on that. I think we're here because he's just an amazing guy. He deserves to be talked about every year, and we should celebrate his life.
No, absolutely. My intention is to have this be a celebration, and we're coming down to the end here and all.
We're not ready for the end. I'm not going to leave this. This panel has just
far too early.
I've got something very special for you, Phil, that I need you here for. I'm going to come to my man BJ here, and thank you for BJ again for being part of this, man. I really appreciate you being here and accepting the invite to be part of the panel. And I do want to ask you, we get into this discussion often about she's referenced as Holly X in Jesse's book, and some of the lyrics in "You Shook Me All Night Long." And I'll just stop there and just let you go and see what your thoughts are on this subject.
Yeah, there's definitely Bond lyrics for "You Shook Me All Night Long." There's a lot of Bond lyrics on Back in Black. I mean, Jesse did just a fantastic job, really uncovering, but not only. It wasn't like speculation. Like he was coming up with with evidence that was like, this is too close to be a coincidence. That just So yeah, I know. I think, and I think the other point that Jesse really came up with in the book too. "You Shook Me All Night Long" is definitely a lot of if not all Bond, it's mostly Bond, and then but you can kind of tell on Back in Black what songs aren't Bond. I mean, it's almost like you're starting, like that's the first kind of the AC/DC that you kind of know today, where it's all kind of about it's kind of machismo and guns, and just it's sort of like juvenile almost to the lyrics to a certain point for a lot of it. That started to show on Back in Black, so you can kind of see what is it. I mean, I don't think "Giving the Dog a Bone" is a Bond song. I don't think "Let Me Put My Love Into You." I mean, maybe parts, but it's just there's just certain tunes that you can kind of tell. But yeah, but no, Bond is certainly on a lot of tracks on Back in Black. His influence for sure. That whole sort of young Johnson thing. I mean, I think that they stuck to that line for a long time, even though they slipped up a few times with it. But yeah, Bond, and "You Shook Me All Night Long" especially that's got Bond all over it.
Jesse, what's your final take, or not final take, but in reference to Bond's notebooks that went missing, and you've referenced lines that no one knows what happened to those notebooks. Did you come up with any ideas or possible solutions as to where they may have went?
I guess there is a couple of scenarios. One, it went back to his family. Two, they disappeared. Three, they ended up with Ian Jeffrey, who used to be the road manager for AC/DC. He's talked about having a sort of a sheaf of Bond's lyrics, but I don't know whether they were songs for Back in Black, or whether they were the lyrics that Bond was working on for the French band Trust. Yeah. So who knows? I mean, everyone keeps it pretty close to their chest. They're not very willing to talk to biographers, and writing an AC/DC biography, as BJ is discovering now, is incredibly hard work, and it involves a lot of detective work, and you've got to work around certain restrictions. They're not a band that sort of invite biographers into their sort of their private realm.
Yeah. Well, before we get to my man Phil Olivieri here, I wanted to say quickly, on behalf of as a comment from Mr. Larry Black. Larry, I certainly appreciate this comment. On behalf of everyone at the Bond Scott Forum, thanks for the great podcast, gentlemen. Time to raise a glass to the man, the myth, the legend. Cheers. We're certainly going to do that in just a moment. Larry, I want to thank you for that comment, because there was a lot of work that went into this. And I want to thank everybody for hanging in there with us through the technical difficulty early on with the audio. But Phil, I want to talk to you, my man, because you've got some answers that I need for Back in Black. And one thing I want to say about Bon, and BJ just did an awesome job outlining the lyrics to "You Shook Me All Night Long," and I think that if those lyrics, I'm of the assumption or presumption that they are some of Bon's lyrics. I think Jesse did a great job, just as BJ said, outlining in The Last Highway. It wouldn't make sense if they weren't, almost, I mean, it was to that point. So I want to say, in one angle to look at this, what a fitting send off for him that his lyrics and his contributions made it to the biggest selling rock album of all time. I don't know how anyone else feels about that. For me personally, I think of it that way. And that to me says, that's just my own personal take, and everyone may feel differently, but for myself, I think that's great that, and we don't have time probably to get into the issue of the royalties, and maybe we can save that for a round two sometime if Jesse ever wants to have one. But Phil, I want to talk to you about recording Back in Black. So we know that here we've got Mutt Lange, I believe Mike Platt, Tony Platt, excuse me, Tony Platt. Yep. I was thinking Mike Shipley, because that was Mutt Lange's engineer that passed away, unfortunately, just a few years ago. So Mutt Lange, Mr. Platt, they're working in the studio with Angus. Something is not right. You take us down the rest of that road as the tones worked out for Back in Black.
Yes, of course. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
No, the things were pretty, I have to say, things were I should say, very right in the studio at the Bahamas, in the sense that there are no reports of major happenings or events other than, I don't know, rain and other things, small events happening in the island. The band, I think, was leading very intense recording live in those days. And as it's been reported by several sources, including Tony Platt himself, who spoke to me, for example, in person when I went to London to meet him, in order to catch some secrets about his way of recording guitars and other instruments, for that matter, of course, because the guy was just a genius, Tony Platt.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that it is true, of course, that the core is always the band, and the way that they played and the way that they performed, the way that they worked together with their work ethics, which is in fact the main thing that it's already been underlined here. These guys are simple people, just like us, and just like the people that follow us, more right now, at least the most of them. Simple people with a dream, and they have learned the hard way that they needed to work hard, especially coming from where they came from and what they had. That means nothing. And with George Young actually teaching with the other two brothers the lesson that you really got to make this work, guys, otherwise you're going to find yourself with nothing, or very little. Talking about $30,000 for Bon in 1979, for example. So they were very hardworking guys that would essentially meet at 11 a.m. in the studio. After that, Tony Platt, the sound engineer, had been to the studio starting at 9:30, 10 a.m. in the morning to make sure that every single device in the studio was working, because that was one of Tony's mentions, the things to do, was to make sure that all the equipment worked. And let me tell you, if nobody among you has been in a recording studio, one of the analog recording studios, at least nowadays, everything works digitally, or most of the stuff. But back in the day, we're in 1980. The console was analog, all the limiters, all the preamps, all the, modules. Mike will remember something, I guess, from those days, from recording and playing. So,
with the 2-inch tape, and the whole made great music though. Fantastic music on those boards.
I used to have the Studer 800 in Rome, and I purchased it just because of AC/DC, by the way. So I started making music because of AC/DC, and I will die with AC/DC's music, being played at my funeral.
Have you heard? I don't remember if I was told or whether I heard it, but I'm pretty sure that one of the guys in the band said that when they record, and this was probably referencing Power Age, or maybe Let There Be Rock, that they would put tape over the VU meters, so they weren't, I don't know, governed by that meter. They just wanted to sound right. Have any of you guys ever heard that one?
Wow, no. But I'm gonna write that down, and I'm gonna keep in touch with you. So we'll talk more about this. But
yeah, I thought it was kind of a cool idea. Don't let a gauge, tell you how your sound should go. So ignore. I don't know. Well, maybe it gave it that frantic, ready to explode at any second kind of sound that they had.
I will say,
especially
quickly,
on those albums.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I will say quickly, when last time Phil and I spoke, if you remember, Phil, we talked about some of the reasons for AC/DC parting ways with Mutt Lange for those about to rock. And what we kind of summarized was that Mutt Lange at that point, if you think about the other artists he was working with, had so developed his approach as a producer. He was as much of an artist in the producer realm as a lot of bands were in the artist realm. And I've said that to people before, and they're like, "What are you talking about? Like, that's not even possible." But I really believe that it was, and I think that's evidenced by the fact that they did leave after such a string of successful albums. But Phil, did you have anything else to add as far as in the studio with, and as far as the I'm going to do what you did. I'm going to go look up. Did Tony Platt or Mutt Lange ever put tape over the VU meters?
I don't think they did, because Tony wouldn't do that. So Power Age had a different sound engineer, and including George himself. So, but I do believe that it makes very much sense, because those were people that do listen. Those were people that listen to each other and listen to what they're doing. That's what the great bands do. When we have a band of people, a group of people playing together, you listen to each other. Now, AC/DC are masters at this. Yeah. I wish the world had more people studying like that, guitar and composition and arrangement. So you asked me if I had more things to say about the studio. Yes, I do, but we're going to end up tomorrow. So I don't think we have time for that. But this particular panel,
I just want to ask Phil. I mean, what do you think is the biggest difference between Let There Be Rock, Power Age, and Highway to Hell, Back in Black in terms of production?
Huge differences. I mean, every album is an adventure, and it's on its own. Wow. Okay, I still listen to those daily, Nate. Still do, and I still learn the stuff. And there's a few files that float around the internet when you can hear just the guitars, because some people have been subtracting, with the right algorithm, stuff like that. So I get to hear, I've got a bunch of those files. I go and listen to the guitars on their own, and I still capture stuff that I thought I had gotten, and I didn't have it. So the interplay and the playing inside the song that they've done, the amount of perfection for those years, for what they could do in an analog studio with a tape, cutting and pasting that tape, and I just know that they did that. So for example, one major difference when they got Tony Platt, guys, you gotta hear this. Tony was he told me that in person. Phil, they chose me, mate, because they could, I can't do Tony, but because he knew how to cut and paste like no one else in the industry. So he was able to actually work that tape. What does that mean, Phil? That means that whatever little mistake or whatever different arrangement or whatever thing needed to be done ex post, once they recorded, he could actually go there. Today you do it with Pro Tools. You just go there, cut a little bit and switch it and move it a little bit and scoot over a little bit. Tony knew how to do this. And so he was the arm of Mutt Lange.
Back when it was razor blade.
Put it on a little metal thing, and it like a little miter box, and they cut it and spliced it,
Yep.
splice job. And
so I was saying back when it was a razor blade and not Pro Tools.
Back in its own right, because you had to listen. You had no visuals, no monitor. I do it daily, and I think about it. How in the world did you guys do that? I would like to, and how many times did they have to repeat the phrases? And I don't think many times really, because they weren't like that. And so they were working together as a band, recording the backing tracks first together. And it was just 2-3 times they would do it, and then moving on with the next song. And I know that this was true with Back in Black as well. So they were amazing players. I can't stress this enough, guys. And I want to send the message out to the world every time someone is listening to us. The playing, the instrument, less Pro Tools and more playing, more trying to really get it, trying to be listening, just like Mikey said. Cover the thing. Don't look at but let's listen with our ears. And it's something that I still try and do at 53 almost.
Phil, but I mean, as a listener, do you prefer, the grittiness of Let There Be Rock and Power Age to the Lange albums?
There are technical reasons, for example, for Let There Be Rock. Let There Be Rock, they used a technique. They overdid something, which is a solid state saturation, essentially. So if you can hear it in the guitars immediately, and you will hear that there's a different type of crunch, and you should be nodding already. You know that. And that crunch was actually obtained by overdriving the solid state non-tube preamps that are in the Neve console usually, and they mostly used Neve consoles also back in the day. And so they would run the microphone preamplifiers hotter than usual. So they weren't looking at those VU meters. So Mike had something there. Even on Let There Be Rock, they were listening with their ears, getting to the sound that they wanted. So you get solid state because it's not tube technology. They would use the amplifier, go to the mic, and the microphone preamp was saturated itself. So you would add the tube saturation coming from the tube amp, Marshall, and you would add on top of that an additional layer that you could call the fizz, and you can hear that on Let There Be Rock massively. Power Age was done entirely different. So it doesn't have that sort of fizz and solid state distortion, not in the amounts that you can hear on Let There Be Rock. So sonically, they were trying to do something different, and they got it working. And every time AC/DC do the same stuff or something very similar, but they sound different each and every time, especially back in the early days. Wow.
Did the Neve boards have the flying faders thing at that point? We recorded on some Neve boards where the flying fader thing was amazing.
I don't think
like
they
automation.
had. No, not in the mid 70s to the late 70s. I think that they got on the MCI console that they had for
Back in Black
tracking at the Bahamas. I think that was one of the very first ones to have a little bit of automation, probably just for the levels, by the way. So otherwise, it was George and Henry, all together, and the boys from the band, with those playing back the tape with those levels going and increasing at the proper time, because there's a whole lot. We don't see it, but but we can hear it. There's a whole lot of level, adjusting during the song for the solos, for some parts, some bits, even on the left and the right, are actually raised or lowered. So there's a whole lot of stuff happening in AC/DC albums. They're just a masterpiece.
So really, that was an MCI console at Compass Point?
For Back in Black, yep. They've got one. They've got one.
I mean, normally you could hear an MCI, that MCI sound, and I didn't recognize it. I believe it.
They've got an
MCI 500 series. So
Yeah.
I know that I studied that stuff so much in depth just to be able to emulate it later.
Well, all those Ted Nugent, if you listen to any Ted Nugent stuff back in the 70s, he recorded at Quad Radial, which was a stone's throw from Criteria, and that was all MCI boards and everything. So it's got that certain sound, like a Rickenbacker bass. You just know when you're hearing one. And I would have never guessed that Back in Black was an MCI console. Anyway,
well,
I guess we're getting technical here.
And then they fixed it with a 1081 modules in New York, and that also played a major part. So the equipment that they used all played, and they used it masterfully. Every single thing that AC/DC used, they brought it to, and they used it to the fullest of its technical capabilities. I can almost see the guys like working and sweating and, and really squeezing every drop of tone. Can I say that out of the equipment that they had? And it's been like that.
I want to give BJ the last word here as we start to wrap up. And I just wanted to say, as far as the MCI consoles, what's interesting, just to make a quick point, Michael, you mentioned the Neve boards. You can still find so many of the Neve boards that are left from that era. Speaking of that, you can watch the Sound City documentary.
Saw that. Yeah.
Dave Grohl bought the Neve board from Sound City. You can find so many API consoles from that point in time. MCI is hard to find. The only one that I know of is at Spirit House Studios in Massachusetts. And matter of fact, it's if it's not the same model from Back in Black, it's very, very close because they use that as a selling point for the studio. BJ, so I wanted to have you close us out, man. Take us. We've lost a hero in Bon Scott. Brian Johnson comes into the band, and talk to me about what Brian Johnson's going through at that period in time as he's going to be stepping into that role. What kind of weight he's going to be feeling, the pressure he's going to be feeling as AC/DC starts to usher on and move forward.
Well, he's kind of shitting himself at that point. I mean, he gets the job, and it's one story that is probably going to open my book, honestly, is about Brian being at the studio, and he just gets done recording the vocals. He's done, and he's sitting outside the studio, and he's having a cigarette, and he's contemplating to himself what he's going to do next, because he's convinced that he's not even convinced that they're going to release the album with him on it, and then he thinks that if they do, that it's not going to do well, and they're just going to move on and find somebody else. So yeah, I mean, he was full of self-doubt at that point, and I'm sure he was just, it's funny. Brian gets kind of beat up a little bit because his story changes a lot. I think honestly with him and Back in Black, I think it was a case of there's just so much kind of coming at him at once, and he's trying to please so many kind of different things that it just that's why his story is kind of all over the place sometimes. That, and some of the legends that have come out before, and it's probably just because he's been asked about it so many times that it's hard to kind of repeat over and over again. But no, I mean, I think he's just shitting himself at that point. But I mean, Mutt Lange got a fresh Brian Johnson. He got Brian Johnson in his prime, and I don't think Brian Johnson even knew he was in his prime until he got into the studio and Mutt got those vocals out of him. I mean, and that's why his performance is so good, and that's why you really haven't heard a Brian performance. I mean, it's kind of the first performance he does with AC/DC is the pinnacle of his career. I mean, like, that's the one he's always going to be judged by, and it's just such a high benchmark. But it's great. But yeah, Mutt Lange has a lot to do with that. But yeah, Brian, I mean, I think I don't think even he knew what he was singing. I mean, I think he was doing parts over and over and over again, and I don't think that he knew. He was probably thinking, I didn't get it the first time. Why am I doing this 10 more times? And then but that's the genius of Mutt Lange.
Well, gentlemen, I can't thank you enough for spending this time with all of us together talking about this. Jesse, I want to thank you for opening up the forum to do this. I want to thank you for asking me, to take part in it. It means a lot to me, and I appreciate it. And, for everyone else, thank you, gentlemen, for taking time out of your schedules to be a part of this. I want to go around the table here and just let everyone make a closing statement about Bon, and also let everyone who's watching know where to find you, and if you'd like, what you have coming up next, and we'll start where we left off with BJ.
Just a total badass. I mean, like I said, those records, Powered is the greatest record of all time. I mean, it's just that's it. I mean, that's just go listen to Powerage.
It's all right. We'll let Jesse have the last one. How about you, Michael?
Rest in peace, Bon. You were an influence, and you were great, and you were amazing, and you made kick-ass rock and roll, and I mean, you set the bar for just just good rock and roll frontman vocals, putting it out there, balls to the wall, just reckless abandon, and your lyrical genius. It all came together as this killer package, and you're missed, and you will always be missed, especially by your fans. And I'm proud to say that I'm one, and I'm sure everybody watching this broadcast who's ever interested in it is the same. And that's it. Just rest in peace, man. You know.
Very well said, Mr. Phil Olivieri.
As I said, it was too short. I don't accept the fact that we're closing this. I don't accept it, and I will not leave. So we have to do it again. There is so much to say, and you know it, Jesse, and so do you, BJ and Mike. So we have to do this again on another subject. I mean, always, of course, AC/DC subject. So we should probably go deep into an album and talk about it. And so there's that. What am I coming out tonight? I was thinking about this as I was watching and listening, all of you there. And I said, boy, I mean, AC/DC is certainly one of the best things that happened in my life. Okay. Because not only they saved my life, but I ended up working with them. Wow. And I love their music, not because I'm still hanging with them and the products and everything, which thank God works very well, but it's just because the music, the energy, it's an example of great music for everyone. And even, even the people behind the music, in fact.
Yeah.
That's why I love them so much. I'm going to come away with having to purchase 3 books. So, the guys that are listening, watches, we got 3 books to buy. I already had one of Jesse. Now I need the other one. BJ, I want yours. There's no doubt. And I'm going to be in touch.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I agree with that too. Very well said,
Mike,
Phil. And Phil, you had already tentatively agreed, and Jesse did as well for Power Age. So for a Power Age classic rock rundown, we'll have to see after this if Jesse still wants to do that or not. But
I can't tell I can describe how it was recorded, what it was used to record it, how it was done, what was used. So it's interesting stuff, and Jesse has so much to tell us about the lyrics and probably the composition process for which was.
Hey, by the way, Phil, drive up to St. Pete and go see Mazzaro's Italian Market. You'll be glad I sent you there.
Si, signore.
Has nothing to do with this podcast, but
a good
I had to throw that in there.
Talk about. So I'll just reply with si, signore.
And last up, Mr. Jesse Fink.
Just want to touch on something Phil just said, about the lyrics. I mean, I think what made Bon unique was that he wrote from his life, and that's why albums like Power Age and Highway to Hell just still resonate with people 40 plus years later. There's songs that are incredibly rich, and you get something out of them every time you listen to them. And I think that's kind of what sort of later period AC/DC lacks. Is that you just don't have that sort of the many layers to the song that Bon was able to give those songs. I think that there are a lot of clues to Bon's life in the lyrics to his songs. And that's what makes him fascinating, and that's also why and BJ was talking about "You Shook Me All Night Long." If you read that second verse of "You Shook Me All Night Long," I don't think there's any doubt that Bon wrote it, and it came from his life. And I was, privileged to go to Miami and kind of see the people that were around him in 1979, and I came away absolutely convinced that second verse of "You Shook Me All Night Long" was Bon's. And just to finish, I just think, AC/DC is an incredible rock band. They play better than anyone else in the history of rock and roll. There's absolutely no doubt. And that's why they're still the greatest rock band in the world. But I think that what Bon was, he was the spirit of AC/DC. And he's the spirit of rock and roll. And he was a man who just encapsulated the sort of life that a lot of us want to live and we don't. And that's why he remains a fascinating guy. And that's why we're here 41 years later celebrating his life. It's why we have a Bon Scott forum on Facebook where we've got 12,000 people kind of talking about him every day. He didn't live a very long life, but 41 years later, I tell you that people never run out of things to talk about when it comes to Bon Scott. So,
Amen.
This is a tribute to him, and that's why we're here, and we will continue loving him, and we'll be here next year probably talking about the same thing.
Hope.
Gentlemen,
So
thank you so much.
let's do it next year.
Sign me up.
And
All right. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. BJ, I do want to let you know, someone in the forum is asking, it says, I've devoured all of Jesse's books. Is BJ's book out? Could you give us a timeline? There are people wanting to know. So
Hopefully by the toward the end of this year, if not the end of the year. But yeah, it's as Jesse said, it's writing an AC/DC book is no easy task. So it's a lot of outside parts dictating how fast that comes out. But yeah, hopefully by the end of the year.
Well, I just want to say for myself, I've said enough. I just want to say that, of course, with Jesse and Phil, I've had the utmost respect and profound respect for both of you. BJ and Michael, it's been a real privilege to get to know each of you a little bit in this process. And I want to thank all of you for being a part of this. I wanted to say, I had to write this down to make sure I would get it right. But in closing, there's only one thing that felt appropriate for me on a day like today. And that is, I wrote it down word for word so I wouldn't mess it up. We've talked about ups and downs and highlighted some of the triumphs, reminisced about his untimely death that I think I speak for all of us when I say it was far, far too soon. Regardless of the circumstances, yet whatever internal struggles he faced, he left us a body of work, and the emotion and effort in that work has inspired all of us in some way, and we've voiced a lot of that here tonight. So for that reason, I'll raise a toast to Bon Scott and just say thank you for all the inspiration that you have left us as a result of that body of work. Cheers, gentlemen.
Yes.
I don't have it. I just have something here.
And that will close us up for tonight.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Jesse.
Thank you to Aaron for pulling this all together. I did not have any technical know-how to do something anywhere approaching what you've done today. So thanks very much, mate, from all of us.
Well, no, it's my pleasure, and
thank
apologize for the first few minutes, but we got it ironed out, and then we got to, if we can get a comment saying this is the best podcast I've ever watched, we'll take that, gentlemen. So, like I said, well,
let's do it weekly then. Okay.
Just right, just once a week from now on. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a point.
That's not a bad idea, Phil.
It's not a bad idea.
Let's start the Bon Scott podcast. Let's do it.
Yeah.
So much to say, so much to talk about, so much to share information. The younger people and the way that music is made, and it can be made, and the playing and the composition, the arrangement, everything. There's so much to say.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Gentlemen, have a great evening. God bless all of you, and stay safe if you're in bad weather. For the two of you down there in Florida,
we're good.
When I vacation,
that's beautiful.
when I vacation, I'm gonna ask if maybe.
But I'm sorry for the rest of the nation. I wish you all to stay safe and warm, you guys.
Just if there's a guest room, that's all it was. Okay. Have a good night. Thanks, everybody. We'll see y'all soon.
Right.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
guys.